So I'm going to go through a little bit of the history, a little bit of what's going on in the market, and a little bit of what the future we hope entails. But first, a little bit about ourselves. My name's Kevin Williams. I'm a specialist in out-of-home entertainment. We work in the sector which we call the digital out-of-home entertainment sector, and I'll go into a little bit more detail about what I mean by that. It's important to understand that this is an established industry that's been going for quite a considerable time. Its roots are in the arcade and the theme park industry, and it isn't as new as some people would like you to imagine. Just an idea of some of the companies that KWP works with. We also run a newsletter that covers the sector, so if anybody would like details about that, please give me a shout. Digital out-of-home Interactive Entertainment Association was set up some time ago when it became clear that immersive entertainment was really taking a foothold in the out-of-home entertainment business. And what I mean by out-of-home entertainment business is really the key sectors. And for those that are colorblind, the big green blob at the back there is the pay-for-play, what you would normally call the arcade industry, but we call the amusement sector. The purple blob is the theme park and visitor attraction sector. The yellow blob is the expo and educational side, museums. The orange blob is the retail and the hospitality sector, retail-attainment, one of those awful words. And then the big blue blob is an emerging blob, and that's the gaming industry. That's the casino and the gambling sector. And the grey blob at the top is the consumer games industry. They do have involvement in our sector. We use their intellectual properties, their IPs, but fundamentally, they are their own $5 to $6 billion industry, while we're a very small $1 billion industry at the bottom. As I said, the technology is not new. The industry is not new. The cinema industry can trace itself back to the drop the coin in, watch what the butler saw experience, and we have seen experiential go across the whole of the pay-for-play industry since its beginnings in the 1800s. What we're talking about is the immersion of the individual for a period of time which they're prepared to pay for. That is our industry in a nutshell. We have played with virtual reality before in our sector. Back in the early 90s, VR first made its stab at mainstream in the arcade market, and we were lucky enough to have a number of those type of machines in our sector. Obviously, the technology was at its infancy, but a lot of the ground rules that we have come to employ today were established then. I'm lucky enough to come from a background working with Walt Disney Imagineering, and we were one of the first to actually start deploying virtual reality into theme parks to see how that application worked. Well, as they keep on telling us, nothing is new, everything is old, but just in a different wrapper, and we have seen virtual reality go from failure to hero again, thanks mainly in parts to the investment in the technology through technological advances, and those advances obviously are the mobile phone. So we've gone from putting a shoebox on your head using CRTs to now being able to use the latest OLEDs with tracking, with depth perception, with a lot more bells and whistles due to the micronization of the technology, and also the ability to put a lot more investment in technology into the bang for the buck. So anyone that tells you that this technology is brand new, it's got a long lineage just in the entertainment sector. So let's talk about now. VR is cool again. I try and explain to our clients this kind of formula to explain where out-of-home entertainment virtual reality applications fit. We have the 9D and the 5Ds and the 4Ds, which are the passive experiences. We have the interactive attractions, which is rubbing a little bit of VR into an existing attraction. Then we have the pop-ups, the arenas, and the next generation, which is mixed, as we see it. So the 4D, 5D, 9D, I didn't know there was that many dimensions, experiences. Fundamentally, we have seen companies take this technology and use it as a film projection experience that is immersive. Here is an example of a system that was used as a publicity promotion for the Mummy film. You put your head-mounted display on, you sit in a special seat that turns with the motion, with the action on screen, and you compel the individual into experiencing what Tom Cruise was doing in the plane and simulating the 0G. We've also seen the application of taking a motion base that would be used with a conventional 9D system and having that linked up to VR experience. Again, everybody gets to see a 360 representation of the virtual environment, and the motion base moves in sympathy to the film experience. Quite large, mostly cinematic and large-scale attractions, but of course the technology is being scaled down for application in smaller venues. So now we see our friends at Tenko who have created an alliance with Sony, and in Japan they're starting to deploy virtual reality pods, marrying a lot of the experience from the arcade industry and applying it to a virtual reality experience. And that has been taken one step further with IP, so intellectual property from Ubisoft, the Rabbids experience, married to a motion base, married to virtual reality, and suddenly you have an immersive entertainment experience that sits in a footprint that can be put in any facility. So it is borrowing a lot of the clothing from the amusement industry, but applying virtual reality technology. And as I was saying earlier, you have a theme park attraction, a couple of $1 million roller coaster, and what normally happens after 4 or 5 years, you have to pull it down and then build another $20 million roller coaster. But thanks to virtual reality, you can give it an extended life by adding a little bit of virtual reality to the experience. And we're lucky enough to have in England 2 roller coasters that have been converted to incorporate virtual reality elements, and we're seeing that being done across the market in the theme park sector. You have a theme park attraction, you want to create a compelling horror experience, rub a little bit of virtual reality into it, and suddenly your dark ride becomes a lot more scarier. The Darren Brown Ghost Train marries motion base, marries animatronics, and marries virtual reality to create a compelling dark ride that is unlike any other that is out in the market. Can't afford to have a large dark ride in your facility, then you use a robotic arm. The robotic arm can simulate any motion you want, so you can have any roller coaster you want as long as the virtual reality experience is synchronized perfectly to the motion that the robot is achieving. And again, you can stick that kind of system in any facility, so we're not lumbered with only being able to place this type of technology in theme parks. Got bumper cars? Add virtual reality to it. So rather than ramming your sister, you're ramming Mario in a virtual experience. This is being devised into 2 aspects. We're seeing the deployment of this technology as adding virtual reality to existing experiences like bumper cars, but we're also seeing next generation technology also being applied to what I would call traditional ride experiences, and I'll go into that in a little bit more detail later on. The dark ride, the walkthrough, the horror experience, all now being accentuated by the use of virtual reality systems. But we're looking at this type of technology as a kind of a crossover. We know what we did traditionally, now let's add a little bit of virtual reality. The next stage is let's see where this technology can take us in a brand new direction. Fundamentally, VR is expensive for the majority of the people out there, high quality VR that is. And so we've seen the VR arcade industry blossom phenomenally. The ability of going into a facility, paying a certain amount of money, and then being able to enjoy the best of the latest VR experiences has become very compelling. We calculate that there's about 200 to 300 of these type of facilities that are dotted around just Northern Europe at the moment, or Central Europe at the moment. There's about a couple of thousand in China, and again a couple of hundred in North America. And we have one just down the road from where we're talking now. It is a popular attribute to offer from a retail entertainment point of view. You have walking past traffic and you can pull them in to an entertainment venue. The cinema industry is interested in this. They've kicked out the concept of having an arcade in the cinema, but they still want to increase the dwell time of the audience that comes to see their films. So now a number of companies are playing around with the idea of marrying licensed IP virtual reality experiences to cinema enclosures. The arcade industry has also taken up the cudgels for this in Japan and are starting to do this across the international market. So you have a company like Bandai Namco, a very large arcade operation. They are now creating their own unique VR zone entertainment facilities, which they then hope to parachute into various locations. We have 2 of them already in the UK. We have about 6 of them in Japan. We're going to have about 2 of them by the end of the year in America. You can see how the momentum's going. Then we look at the move across to trying to come up with the next generation. So you've taken the consumer hardware, or you've added mobile VR to an attraction. Now you're looking at taking this to free roaming to the next stage. So we now have backpack VR systems being deployed into the entertainment market. The nice thing about the backpack is you haven't got the cable, you're not tethered, and you've got free roaming. And in this particular example, the free roaming within the maze gives you physical feedback, walls and vibrating panels, as well as the virtual experience. Take that one step further, and we have location-based entertainment using VR technology. So rather than just parachuting in this technology into a particular facility, you have a dedicated facility that is 100% the virtual experience. And again, backpack PC with a virtual reality system and a strong force feedback experience. Here are our friends from the Void. IP is king. You'll hear a lot of these examples I'm showing you are linked to a very popular intellectual property as a leverage tool. Here we had Ghostbusters, then our friends at the Void jumped in bed with Walt Disney to include Star Wars, and they're now working on the next generation that will be using another popular IP. Free roaming virtual reality experiences with backpacks. Some people like to call them laser tag 2.0. I'm not really sold on that argument. It borrows a lot from the laser tag sector, but it isn't really a clear example of how the technology works. And then we have the deployment and test of this technology. Our friends at VR Studios worked with Dave & Buster's, a very large social entertainment facility operator in America, and they tested and they tested and they tested what concept worked best. While the market continued, we've seen pop-up entertainment systems that deploy free roaming or tethered in this particular case. So though it may look like they're moving around unencumbered, they're actually connected by a cable, but the game restricts them in their movements. Or we have omnidirectional treadmill systems if you don't have the warehouse space to put backpack systems into. And as I said, Dave & Buster's, after evaluating the market for some period of time, decided to get a very large IP, Jurassic World, and marry it to a motion-based system, like a 4D system, but using interactive entertainment, and suddenly we have the Jurassic World VR experience, launched last month, brand new and very compelling. Anyway, I've talked very briefly about the out of home from the entertainment point of view. I'll touch upon the gaming side, which is important. The gaming industry has seen VR as a possibility for immersive eSports. They've seen it as a means to utilize it for simple iGaming from the home, but they're also now looking at it as a wagering tool for the gambling and the casino sector. Someone plays inside to play, pay to play, but all of your mates are outside guessing which zombie's going to eat your head. eSports, a natural progression from wagering to eSports. It's a phenomenal business, and the virtual reality sector wants to include that into the mix. eSports sees VR as a great way to get people to be part of the experience while being in the audience, and already a number of casinos in Las Vegas are starting to change their sports gaming areas into eSports areas, incorporating a virtual reality element. Very briefly, I'm a consultant, and so I like to give you both sides of the picture, or else you don't pay me. Fundamentally, we have to be aware of the elephants in the room. VR does make some people uncomfortable. We need to be aware, using it in the public space, that we have waivers to cover people's liabilities, and that we can't just use any off-the-shelf consumer VR technology. We have to use technology that's specially configured for our particular needs. We have to be mindful of the hygiene element. Chocolate is a real nasty thing to get off head-mounted displays. Trip hazards. Anyone that tells you that you can operate a tethered VR system without some kind of assistance or staffing is lying to you, and you have to be aware of the age restrictions. Pay the piper, we need the money. You can't just use the software without paying the developers, and we have to make it socially inclusive. That's how our industry works. And as I was saying, we're not just using consumer technology anymore, we're now moving across to having special virtual reality head-mounted displays created for our sector that fulfill the requirements that we need, the robustness, the resilience, the ability to drop something. You know, I wouldn't want to drop a Vive from this particular height, but these new systems are resilient enough to do that. We're very mindful in the out-of-home entertainment sector that VR is not the be-all and end-all. It is a tool, it is an arrow in our quiver, as it were, and we have to manage the experience. VR is going to be going through some interesting speed bumps in the next couple of months as the industry formats itself, and we have to be mindful to manage the expectation. And that's part of the reason why we're looking at new draws to drive people to our facilities on top of virtual reality, and mixed reality is really something that we're banking on in our future. The ability to use augmented reality systems where a virtual information is overlaid over real world allows for real life Street Fighter kinds of game experiences, again being linked into eSports. As I said previously, you know, if you've got the driving vehicles, if you've got the go-karts or the bumper cars, it's not that difficult with the right technology to drop virtual reality in it. It's not that difficult also to drop augmented reality into it. It's literally playing Mario Kart sitting in a car. And then, of course, augmented reality laser tag, real laser tag using an augmented reality entertainment component. And you don't just need to wear glasses for VR. If you've got the usage of the latest projection technology, then suddenly you've got an augmented reality climbing wall. If you've got a pod, use the correct type of projection systems, and you've got an augmented reality experiential system with tons of marijuana flowing out the back of it. I call this the sneeze guard approach, but again, if you're worried about people messing their hair up, putting makeup in the cleaning process, then you look at the use of more immersive display technologies. Here's one example, the personalized dome. I like to call it the sneeze guard. The other opportunities are to use 3D projection mapping to compel, so everything in that environment is real except its bland colors. The illumination, the colors, and the animation are supplied by 3D projection mapping screens. And then finally, really the future of our technology, and where a lot of my clients are putting their investment towards their near-term future, is total immersive displays. Already used by the military and law enforcement, the ability to drop people into the virtual experience without the need for a head-mounted display, without the need for 3D glasses, and for them to be totally compelled in that experience is obviously something that is a draw to our industry. And as you can see, it's a type of technology that you're not going to be dropping into your house anytime soon, so it gives us a kind of lead on the level of immersion and engagement that we can offer the players. And there are a number of concepts for this type of technology that you'll be seeing in the next 2 years. Anyway, I'd like you to take away from my short presentation, very greasy, the fundamentals that you need to be aware of for out-of-home entertainment is this is not a hobby, this is a business, and so it has to be an operational model that generates revenue and repeat visitation. We need the people not just to try it once and go, wow, that was interesting, I'm never going to do that again. We need them to say, wow, I want to improve my high score, I want to compete with my friends, I want to come back and play it again. You have to think very much about compelling content. You know, if you'd asked me this 2-3 years ago, how long content could work in an VR arcade environment, I'd say, yeah, 24 months, 10 months, 4 months. That's what we're looking at now. So we're having to think about having a production line of strong content that builds on the players' enjoyment. And repeatability, not just getting them to come back again, but having a communication with them. Because as the technology progresses, we want to use this audience to help drive the next generation. And, you know, please understand, I have a vested interest. I work in a sector that utilizes this technology. We're not doing this as an experiment. We have customers that are paying and receiving revenue from using out-of-home entertainment technology that deploys virtual reality elements. So for us, this is a long-term investment, and we need to start a dialogue with our audience rather than just jump onto the next lily pad of technology when people get bored of it. Anyway, I've zoomed through very quickly a number of sectors there. The big plug, if you wanted to know more about this sector, there's a book dedicated to this. And by the end of the year, there'll be a new book. So we've updated the 2013 edition, and 2018 edition will be coming out at the end of this year. So please email me if you want to get your hands on that. Do I have time for some questions? I'm in your hands. Well, thank you very much for your time. I hope I didn't bore you too much.